Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Diagnosis Demo. Today, we've got something special because in the past, we've looked at some anonymous users, we've looked at a customer data infrastructure, and we've looked at a composable reverse ETL solution. But today, we are going on-premise, we're going private cloud, we're going into where customer experience meets privacy. So in that respect, I'm not going to sell them anymore. They need to do that themselves and kind of show what they've got. I want to welcome V and Pavel to the show from Meiro. Hey, guys.
Thank you, Matthew. Really good to be here.
Hi there.
Hi. Hey, welcome, guys. Yeah, just a little bit of background. I think our paths crossed a few months ago, and Middle East is kind of a hot ticket right now, especially for customer data platforms. And as you might know, some people who have at least looked at my LinkedIn profile, working in Saudi Arabia, does give a lot of challenges when you're looking for marketing technology. There are a lot of stricter regulations that we're used to even here in Europe. And yeah, trying to decide which Martech solution, and in this case, a customer data platform to use, your choices are limited. And there's a lot of discussions going on. Can we use cloud? Do we need to go to multi-tenant? Do we need to go to private cloud or even on-premise solutions? And when you start looking at those last two categories, the amount of options you have are just significantly smaller. Meiro is one of them. So guys, please tell me exactly what is Meiro and why does it make it a good on-premise solution or even private cloud?
All right, so I guess I'll take this. I'll be the sales pitch guy, and here will be the guy who shows you all the cool stuff. But just kidding. Vojtech is a principal architect and the original developer of the product. I'm sitting across multiple things as we are both co-founders, 2 out of 3 here today, and I look after more product strategy and a little bit of business strategy. Look, I think we kind of internally joke that Meiro is the best kept secret of the CDP industry because we've been here, along all of the big guys. We just don't have the 150 millions we have burned through in last 8 years, so we probably don't know us that well. And yeah, we are definitely better known in sort of the, from where we all sit, more to the east. So we are native to Singapore, Southeast Asia. We have some good customers in Australia, New Zealand. And we are also partly home in Czech Republic and Central Eastern Europe. So Western market do not know us that much. And it's a very good reason for it, just because we have that specialty of focusing on private deployments, which, you don't really need to do that to a large degree in US and in, GDPR governed EU, right? So this is these special markets that we think have big potential. Why we do on-prem, we have a background in data engineering, ETL, so we come from that streak. We don't come from marketing automation streak, as a lot of CDPs these days do, as you can, freely identify yourself as whatever you want these days, which is a bit of a problem of our industry. But we have, first work with development customers in banking and financial services, which sort of predestined us to this blueprint of single tenant, self-hosted, self-custodied environments that we do
and highly regulated, of course.
Naturally, I mean that's the regulation is a given, right? You will typically have regulation on 2 levels. There will be the whatever local national laws around data privacy, and then there will be the banking and financial services regulation, again, locally, so there's at least 2 degrees of regulation on this. And kind of a, TLDR of that is that these companies have a very limited, or these verticals have a very limited choice when it comes to who can they work with, because you simply can't put data to your vendor's cloud. That's usually going to be in 3 places: Japan, India, Europe, or US, right? In the kind of the traditional software as a service multi-tenant. So I guess that's the big difference about us, is that we are not software as a service to begin with, and we think that's going to mean a big difference to, say, 10% of the global market.
Yeah. And when you say, these highly regulated markets, and I'm curious to learn from you, because I've never dealt with the Far East, for instance. What are kind of the times involved in adopting or having, going through a procurement process there, especially even if it's more highly regulated? Is it much longer? Are we talking like 6 to 12 months or even longer?
Really interesting. So our first customer in Saudi Arabia was a sales process that was probably the shortest we have ever done for enterprise customers. That took us something like 8 weeks, simply because we ran into someone who was looking for a locally hosted, local data
Yeah.
residency compliance in KSA customer who simply had an RFP open, structured, went through shortlist, disqualified everyone on it, and closed it because they couldn't find it. So they were probably going to go down the route of self-development, which would be reasonable. But somehow then they came across us and figured that we fit the bill. And within 6 weeks they restructured the RFP open, and we've kind of won the second version of that really, really quickly. So these things I think are. There's a general stereotype. I think we've seen customers in the West have been dragging their feet for a year and a half. We've seen customers in Southeast Asia who've done that, where we've been developing the use cases. There's a different levels of maturity for sure in terms of procurement processes. I don't think there's a big difference I could name globally.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Hey, but this is called diagnosis demo. So I suggest let's get started, V, and then like we did with the previous editions, while V is kind of going through giving a demo, that'll give us some opportunities to ask some more questions, to discuss some more topics. But just to come back, 8 weeks, that's pretty impressive, I have to say. I can't remember any of the RFPs that I've been involved in taking just 8 weeks.
I have to say that it was so good it sounded too good to be true, to the point that we jumped on the plane and we wanted to see the customer in person, because I was like, this sounds like some sort of super sophisticated scam. Like, just couldn't believe it was moving so fast. But when the need is there, the good part about the region is that yes, solutions are few, so you're not really competing with a lot of people, but you have to have a local understanding, you have to have a local support, you have to be appearing as a local company with local implementation partners. It doesn't work otherwise. I think you can't be just importing the sort of the Western culture anymore into markets like this. You have to be highly localized.
Yeah, definitely. Sophie, let's start with the demo. So when we think about a CDP in general, there are different phases that data goes through. We're looking at Google Tag Manager right now. We're looking at data collection. I guess this is where the entire process starts. So over to you.
Yeah, actually, we prepared a demo where we are going through the process of adding a new event from the website and then integrating it into the CDP, setting up the identity resolution, extracting some attributes out of that, and then using it in the personalized real-time personalization of the website and also in some channels, right? So I usually try to do this in the lifecycle of the event. So what you are looking at right now is a tag manager for our, like a sandbox, Meiro.store. This is where we are developing all the features and playing with that, doing some demos. And this is like a fake e-commerce. And I have there the tag manager set up, and in the Meiro init function, which is like pretty standard in a sense of deployment of the SDKs to the website. I have this like a init function where we initialize our SDK. This can be done in Google Tag Manager. This can be done directly on the website, or it can be done on the server-side version of the GTM. So it's very versatile. We can also include some templates to actually resend the data collected by Google Analytics 4. So here I just created very simple, like a condition that will send me a custom event if there is a greeting, right? So this will be basically to collect the data you might have from decorated links in the emails. So we can support there some IDs or greetings and so on. So this is just like a simple demo where we define a new custom event. You can see it here in the line 13, where once the SDK is initialized, creating a new custom event without any definition on the backend. We just take the custom event, we put there some payload. In my case, the action is greeting, and the payload itself is the greeting from the URL. And we will pass it to the CDP and then configure the identity resolution for that and attribute and use it in some banners and in some emails, push notifications, and so on. So you can see how it propagates the data from the events to the rest of the system.
Okay.
So the Tag Manager, actually, I just set it up. I didn't want to bother you with the setup of the Google Tag Manager because it's so easy.
Well, the one question that I have is, since you're private cloud, I mean, or yeah, you can do it in private cloud. Does that mean that the cookie that gets set by Meiro will actually be true first party? I mean, we're not talking CNAME cloaking here or anything. It's going to be on your domain, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is the funny thing with the Safari and their latest version of ITP, because the rest of the industry also caught up to the hype of CNAME cloaking, right? Everything like server-side GTM can run on your subdomain, and right? So the industry caught up a few years ago. It was a really nice solution to get really good cookies with long expiration dates. However, ITP in Safari started to also track the IP ranges of the servers behind the CNAME cloaking. So if the main website, so for example, this Meiro.store, is in a largely different range of the IP addresses compared to the me.meiro.store, which is the backend that collects the data, then it will assume that this is some third party, and it will limit the expiration of the cookie. So as we are basically a single tenant solution, so all our clients, they have separate instances that, separated on the infrastructure level, we can actually deploy to their own infrastructure. So for most of our clients, we are actually deploying the data collection backend to the same server farm, to the same cloud or on-premise or anywhere. They have the original web server, which means that the ranges of the IP addresses are very, very similar.
Yeah,
and
they're within acceptable ranges then. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, we actually do have cookies that are considerably longer with the expiration here, and they are really first-party cookies. So we have the best. It looks like it's the native first-party cookie of the application itself in this sense.
And, Matthew, we're talking about a special markets, right? But this will obviously make a difference in Saudi Arabia again, because the iOS has a 30+% market share there. So mobile browsers obviously as well, right? So long-term tracking obviously matters, and this is big enough chunk for brands to care about that. But again, education of the market probably isn't there for everyone to understand it. But it's our job altogether here.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a difficult topic, and like we've seen, and as V has pointed out, CNAME cloaking was just like a band-aid on a wound. It's only going to temporarily kind of stop the bleeding. In the end, as ITP will see through the differences in the IP ranges, flag a tracking cookie as third party, and really limits its effectiveness. So this solution really kind of nails the what's that English expression? Nails the hammer on the head. I think that's what nail on the head. That's the one. Hits a nail on the head in that you are, from a legal perspective, a true first-party cookie if you're within that IP range, which is significantly going to impact your data quality from a positive end.
Yeah, and I think you want to see that probably as you would want to start seeing CDP here in an angle of federation the data of the raw data into analytical solutions as well, of course, right? That's
well, and we see with Google Analytics 4, I think they just released, I saw someone had a banner on top of GA4 saying that, hey, we're taking into account the number of people who have not consented to be tracked in Google Analytics 4. So they're kind of buffing up the differences, or kind of making up the differences with their predictions and trend data. So do you want to go down that route, or do you want to go down the route of actual data? And I think the latter is going to be the most valuable for companies.
So I'm not sure if we're going to have time for that, but another really curious exercise today for topic for discussion is for us cross domain. So you typically understand cross domain as carrying over link based cookie from one GA domain to another, right? We do it a little bit differently. So within first party domains, we can actually identify customer who does not travel, or visitor who does not travel directly between own domains. And for kind of again these markets, like I keep going to KSA. It's like a lot of holding companies, a lot of kind of family type businesses in very large sense, right? That will benefit from understanding that traffic of one brand is 50%, not 3% overlapping with another brand. That's obviously very, very useful and has commercial implications.
So back to you, V. I see you have entered the Meiro interface. Can you tell us what you were just doing?
Certainly. So when we are setting up the CDP, it actually is quite straightforward process where we go through the administration from the top to the bottom, right? And here in the sources, you can actually categorize all the data sources that you have in the customer data platform. You can see here something like customer care, some internal databases, loyalties, email platforms, POS systems, and so on. And one of the sources is the Meiro web store. This is the SDK that we have deployed to the Meiro store. And I can see that it's already existing. And I'm adding a new event to this one, right? So I go to the second step, which is creating the event itself. And I just did that. So let's take a look at it. And it's basically just like describing the event, because in some of the installations, some of the configurations that we have, we need to also account for the data that is changing. So we have many different events and we need to categorize them. Basically a master data management. We want to have the auditing and different versions of the events if you change the payload and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm just filling it here.
And I noticed the event version at the top right. That's not something you see quite often. And it's interesting that you guys have that there.
Yeah. It's usually okay if you are adding new fields, but at the time when you are trying to remove something, you need a different behavior when you are trying to interpret the event, right? If the payload changes, so it doesn't cause any problems. With description here in the events, I just set up some basic information, name of the event, so we can show it nicely in the UI, some technological name that we are using in calculations. Put it under the source of Meiro Web Store, put there some version. I can also optionally set the event rotation, because keeping the house clean is basically very important, because if you are not careful, you can get quite a lot of different events quite fast. And we have installations with few billion of events. It's not a problem, but some of the events are more important than others. So usually when we see something like transactions, you can keep it indefinitely because they are low in number. But if you see something like page views, they are becoming kind of useless after, let's say, 90 days, 3 months, 6 months or so, because the importance of the page views is like, okay, I want to see and model the behavior models on the recent history, and it doesn't bring any value keeping it that low.
This relates to the event being available within the Meiro dashboard, not necessarily downstream in your data warehouse, correct?
Yeah, so we are rotating it out of the hot storage into cold storage, where we keep it in the archives, but it doesn't occupy like the most expensive computational, the database itself, which needs to be able to retrieve those events in milliseconds.
Yeah, that's nice that you have control over that.
Yeah, so then of course we have some priority setting for the events. So this means that if you have some very important events like transactions, then that you want for them to skip the queue, if there is a queue, then you can actually set it up to priority so they are processed ahead of the queue. So this is the really important part when we are talking on premise, right? So compare it to the software as a service. When you are building a CDP in the cloud, you can use all the bells and whistles, serverless architectures and everything. And you can basically scale to anything if your credit card supports it, right? So if you have big enough limit, you can basically process everything in real time. However, with on-premise installations, especially in those regulated industries, procurement of the new servers, of the new hardware is quite slow. And we are talking weeks to months because of they need to buy the hardware and put it into some Kubernetes cluster. So even though we are at the start of the project setting some hardware requirements, like, okay, if you projecting that you will be processing this many events in this amount of time, we can do our best, but then something always happens, right? So suddenly the client wants to track some very detailed event about the scroll on the page, playing the video or anything else. Suddenly the amount and velocity of the events is growing and growing, and the hardware is not always able to keep up with the demand. Or if you have like Black Fridays, those peaks and so on. So with the limited amount of the hardware, you need to be able to also cover the peaks, right? And this is where queuing comes into place. So we have actually intelligent management of the queues. And when there is this peak, the platform still continues to operate, just that the speed of processing the data, it's all stored, accepted, stored, but there is a queue for the identity resolution and recalculation of attributes, which are the most intensive operations in there.
That's pretty cool. That's definitely something you wouldn't quickly consider with these cloud-based solutions. And that, I mean, how did you guys discover that this was a feature? Was this after one of your first clients, or is this something that's been in there from the beginning? Because, I mean, to be honest, I come from a kind of cloud state of mind, and having to think about this is something that I would have overlooked as a feature requirement.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and I have a feeling because of course we are exploring different competitors and we meet them in RFPs, and so I get in touch with them sometimes, and not saying for all of them, but for some of them, even though they are not telling you that there is a queue, there usually is some queue, because otherwise that can incur the cost, which is larger than projected ratio of the license and so on. So they also have some throttling. It's just that you are not usually seeing that. And we are trying to be as transparent, because we are coming from the background of data engineering. So previously, before Meiro, with Pavel, and Tiana, our co-founder, we had this data boutique, let's say, and we did different projects in data engineering space. So this means that we always brought the algorithms, the pipelines to the client, and we needed to be always 100% transparent how it works, how it's monitored, and all about it. So we are bringing this philosophy also with us. So the client has unconditional access to the raw data, including our data model, to the production databases if they'd like to. They have full control over the monitoring and logs, so they can inspect it, and they can monitor it themselves, or we can do it for them. So we are very transparent in the terms of the monitoring, so we can always tell you, okay, there is a queue, this is how much time it gets to process. And if the queue is overnight, so for example, if there is some daily job that is uploading a huge number of events, few million events over the night to our platform, then we can monitor it and say, okay, so this is how long it takes to process all those events. And if you want to make it faster, you can up the hardware, or you can live with that, and you can set up the priority here. So the normal operations and the events that are used in different scenarios. So for example, in Journey Canvas, where you want to react to the product added to the basket or so, you can make it priority, so it skips the queue. And at the same time, you can keep the rest of lower priority events go processing.
Is there? I'm back.
I think it should be on record though. This was just your video that that dropped out for a bit. So
yeah, we're uploading again. Yeah, you're right. All right.
Yeah. Look, one comment to this, right? So just from different angle, what we see with on-prem, it's usually the discussion isn't, are you on cloud? Is it a SaaS, or are you on-prem, right? There's a lot more nuances to it. What Vojtech said is really important. So we typically spend quite a bit of time with architects. We spend a bit of time with security and with people like network. So what usually happens is that there is more nuances to the deployment flexibility that we bring. So it's not just is it cloud, is it on-prem, but is it cloud, is it our cloud, and you still get a single instance, or is it your cloud account where Meiro lives within your ecosystem? And if it does, do you want it to be airtight? Do you want to manage everything yourself completely? Or do you want, for example, to give Meiro full access for monitoring and updates, and of course, everything. So we can do managed service on your servers, any modality between that. And that's something that really likes, because we usually, when we go to these conversations with clients in RFPs in later stages, it's always tell us how you do that, and we have to explain we don't have a way to do that. We can do it in any way, almost any way you want, because we've seen so many modalities of this, right? So you tell us what's your standards.
How are you experiencing the differences in maturity with these platforms? Especially, I mean, if you look at the West and North America, they seem to be pretty advanced. Middle East is upcoming. And there are definitely a lot of people embedded with some of these companies who have a lot of knowledge. But where do you find the most struggle? Is it the people? I mean, where do you find the most challenges in having companies adopt these kind of solutions? On a high level, it's easier to understand what the added benefit of it is. But like you said, now there are so many different shapes and flavors that you can pour Meiro in. How do you guide them through that process?
Yeah, look, the two short comments to this, because this in itself could be really, really long discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
So my take is that it's always a business strategy and a level of foresight from the business stakeholders that we are dealing with that's troublesome, because sometimes it's very tactical. It's like we've down comes the waterfall of like, we've heard we need a CDP, so we are here to buy a CDP. We don't really know what it's for. There's no strategy in place. There's just really, really very little vision, and that's a problem. The problem is never technology. We have customers where we are embedded within data warehouses that are really, really old. We have customers who are cloud native and everything is the latest version of everything, right? So that's never the problem. I think the advantage of markets like GCC overall, KSA specifically, is that you are looking at the kind of infrastructure is very, very new. So you are dealing with very little legacy, like you may with some older European enterprises, for example, right? So there's nuances, but I don't think they're dramatic. It's just different flavors.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, good point about the legacy part. That a lot of the businesses and companies who are there don't have to deal with 40, 50-year-old databases where data is residing in that you might want to plug into a CDP. I mean, there are some great solutions there, but yeah, that's something you might not have to deal with.
Exactly. Vojtech, where are we?
Yeah.
So currently, what I have done was a very, very easy thing. So going into the identity stitching, because we already defined the event, and now we need to tell the identity resolution algorithm how to actually connect it to the customer profile, right? So this is like when you take the definition of the CDP, the identity resolution is one like cornerstone of that. So anytime we create a new event, it needs to contain some kind of identifier. It can be a cookie, email, phone number, anything else. And we have those categories of the identifiers. You can see them here. This is the cookie. There is some email message ID, which is like unique ID for the sent email that is used in the links in the email. Facebook cookies, Google Analytics cookies, which we are using to create the audiences. Of course, registration tokens from Firebase to send the push notifications to the email, to the mobile applications, and then the emails and the hashed versions and phone numbers of the customers. So what I did is that I know that when I visit the site and I actually send the custom event we saw here, I know there is the cookie inside. We called you the user ID. And for this event, it's just this one. So I basically just created a new rule that is looking inside the event itself and accessing this identifier. So this algorithm that we have developed, it's a classic identity resolution in a sense that it's deterministic. You can create your own stitching category. So if you have, for example, some master ID in your CRM or some other account numbers and so on, then you can create any kind of category in here. And then you just need to instruct the system when this event comes, you look for this identifier at this place, right? So in sense of the data from the web, I know there is a payload, and inside the JSON of the payload, there is a user ID key, which is holding the identifier. So I can simply set it like this. Then one event can actually have multiple identifiers, and we create a true graph of the identifiers. So this is a little bit abstract. This is like this mess is actually
that's the eye candy, right?
Yeah, but like it's really useful when you want to see how the events and their identifiers are relating. This is the sandbox, of course. this has a lot of different settings. But let's take a look at some instance of the customer entity we have in the system and how it actually describes the identity, right? So when new event comes in, and you can see here, this is Pavel's profile on the web store. And what you can see here is the timeline. So when the new event comes in, as I defined it, and I find the identifiers, based on the identifiers, I can attach it to the customer. And once I do that, I can also visualize graphically the identity itself, right? So you can see here that I have like 4 different kinds of identifiers I know about Pavel. And I can see that he has just one browser here.
Mm-hmm.
But to this browser, I know this email and this email. And how do I know that this cookie is actually connected to this email? Is because when I click on it, I know the first event which contained both of the identifiers in the payload. So there was this purchase made from the web store he did with this email. Mm-hmm. And also there was a purchase made with different email from the same browser. So I can draw the conclusion that those 2 emails are belonging to Pavel. And there's also this one. And using the transitivity, I can actually like create the map. Pavel, do you want to send me a link to the profile of Matthew?
Sorry, I didn't have it ready, so we'll probably skip that piece.
Is it in internal?
Do we know, Matthew, with which? No, it's in store. It's going to be in store. Do we know which email address you have used?
Yeah, just use martechtherapy.com. Or Matthew, yeah. There's a lot of Matthews here.
There's a combination of, yeah, super.
So let's look at you. Yeah. So we know this email from you, and what was the device family? So you used Chrome on OS X. And we also know the GA4
ID.
So we can put you into the audience. And this is the hash of the... Do we have some better example maybe with the... What is a good profile?
You can look up Karel Holub, just by Holub, yeah. That's our colleague and consultant I use his profile for demo all the time. It shows really nicely the relation of like multiple browsers, which becomes interesting. And, while Vojtech is looking this up, like one of the interesting things I would have for all of the CDP practitioners and even, our competitors is like, if you can do this, if you can stitch, 3 different email addresses to one profile, because clearly they are one person, then answer me this. And how are you directing a marketing communication to which one? So I go to the browser, I do abandoned basket action, which is the use case we all talk about. How are you going to decide which email to send it to? Are you going to send it all that have consent, or are you just going to send it to me once? In which one?
It's definitely a bigger challenge, and I argue this quite a lot, especially with the consent you need to give on mobile devices. Which one's going to be leading? Are you going to take the one that's on mobile, or are you going to take the one that's on within a native mobile, on a website or on a native mobile app? Tough choices, yeah.
So this is the identity. Just very quickly, we have Karel, and we know that, for example, this cookie which we have. So we have this GA cookie, and this GA cookie actually belongs to the same person because we have the transitivity. So he used the same link from the email we sent him, and he accessed it on a different browsers. So we know that those 3 browsers are actually belonging to the same person based on the graph of the identifiers. So let's get back to the.
But like in any situation, that person will need to identify themselves in some way, be it an email address, be it a login, to be able to stitch everything together. In the end, right?
It could be just decorated link. And what you can actually see here, Vojtech, if you could open all of the 3 red nodes up, so just so we see that, because this is something I use in demos a lot. So this is quite interesting. So this really shows you that we identify this person across multiple different, if you can drag them around a bit. You see that this is a Mac Chrome, mobile iPhone mobile Safari, and the third one is Mac Safari. Yeah. So we basically have this person covered across 3 different things, right? What this tells you, the mobile Safari, why it's so far removed from the email address, is because it didn't interact with the email address directly. So that means that the person never logged in there, never left that email there. But still, if situation like an abandoned basket occurs right now, we can trigger that all the way there because we know it belongs to them, factually. So that usually was something that gives us in use cases like that. This gives us a significant boost in terms of activation, scenarios we can trigger just because we see more people than if you were associating a cookie with an email address, which is the kind of a old standard, old way of doing this, right? So, and again, but once more, this is such a technical detail and nuance that unless you live this like we do, as a marketer, you would really not know what to look for, right? So there's a lot more education to be done in this space.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, definitely. I mean, but still, the identity resolution at a high level does need to be understood, and especially the priorities you set in that, the rules that you laid down. But it's great that you were able to visualize it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is kind of, obviously we could walk you through a bit more. There's a reporting, there's analytics, there is even channels and web personalization that we do. So we are one of those that moved over from data management and data integration all the way to activation and channels on the platform, which is a brave move because it's a big area. Of course, you're competing with specialists and becomes a bit hard. But maybe one more kind of word on the data residency, right? So like if I summarize that kind of the strategy that we have is we think about data privacy a little bit differently than I think most. Usually when data privacy comes up, people think about consents, people think about the end consumer, right? We think about it from the enterprise perspective. I think the old way, the Salesforce, if I use a scapegoat here example, way is centralized SaaS. That's what they pioneered 20 years ago, and it's been really good for a very long time. But now, data privacy to me in enterprise sense means that the workload should go to your data, not your data to where the workload happens. And that's a really, really simple promise, right? So we think, yes, CDP is a great idea. Building it is a terrible idea because you'll be long. You don't have, your priorities will change. You don't have the resources. You don't have the expertise unless you are, one of the top 100 largest companies in the world. So buying makes sense, but I would want to control it. I would want to have it not so vendor people cannot come in because that becomes a risk problem, right? And you can throw at me as many security white papers as you want as a vendor, but if I'm giving you my data, then I'm not going to sleep very well, and probably my compliance won't either. So this is super important for us. And every CDP vendor is looking for something to be first at something, right? But I think we will actually physically be the first vendor that's going to be transactable on all three hyperscaler marketplaces in Azure, AWS, and Google by end of Q1. We're working on all three of them simultaneously. A bit late to the game, to be honest. We should have done that a lot sooner because it's a great avenue for business development, especially again in those regulated markets. And we were talking a lot about Middle East, but one of the other probably less obvious geographies is our partner manager for one of the cloud hyperscalers is localized in Switzerland. And when we talked to him for the first time, he was like, you guys have such a big play in Switzerland because there are companies that can use Google, but they can't use SaaS vendors who cannot localize within the Zurich data center, right? So there are a lot of pockets of these kind of special markets with some sort of slightly unique regulation that require the data to stay in the country. Plus, obviously, verticals entirely of financial services where it's just a default to have it under your control wherever you are, right? So that's what we are trying to kind of specialize in and double down. Seems to be paying off for us.
No, absolutely. And I to come back to one of your previous one of the comments at the beginning, I'm actually hearing a term. Somebody introduced me to it the other day, saying it's an engagement platform with a CDP built in. That you're really focusing around delivering that value through activation, but you have the ease of being able to unify all these profiles. It's something that you guys do tremendously by the looks of it. But you're still focusing on driving that value, not necessarily the collection part and the audience building and the unified profiles, which do form part of that CDP, but it's all about engagement. And yeah, it's interesting to hear that you guys also do full activation in that sense.
look, this kind of takes me to a really interesting point, right, about kind of product strategy. So we were thinking about composability a lot longer before it was cool and before there was so much noise in the market about, who we're not gonna name here, because they are not here in the room with us. But I think, we think about composability in a sense that's a little bit different. So we think about it if you break down the CDP process in, say, 10 steps. So you have everything from the data tracking, data collection. We have customers who for security, for volume reasons, have been doing this themselves. They say, we want one SDK in the website because we work in market where specifically that makes sense. We don't want anyone else for performance reasons. We will pre-process this data and you guys will access it after we have done that. We can do that. You want to bring in visualization layers. So we have for ability of having that built in Metabase as an open source pure play BI tool into the product. We bring it with us wherever we go. But we do not force the customer to use it for visualization, because when we work with mature enterprises, they will usually have a BI tool of their standard. It's going to be something like Tableau, something like Power BI in Microsoft world, of course. And we are saying, so look, we can prepare the data here into tables because it's single tenant and you effectively own these databases. It doesn't matter to us whether you are going to read and distribute it from Metabase that's built into CDP, or whether you are going to be distributing it through your own BI channel, which already typically exists in companies that are, maturity level high enough to adopt the CDP. So we think about it that way. And marketing automation and the activation exactly the same. I think we have customers who are really happy on Salesforce Marketing Cloud for some reason. Maybe they like ancient and antique stuff. We're fine with that. And so we say, absolutely. So you can use our journey canvas. You can personalize workloads or payloads and push it directly into someone else's canvas who owns the content and the campaign management. Because maybe switching doesn't make sense because you have 75 scenarios that you have worked 5 years on developing. So consolidation is not always the ideal answer. Sometimes a lot better interoperability is an answer. And I think, we should not aspire as CDPs to be the kind of end-to-end of everything, especially in larger organizations. I don't think that approach really works too well. So composability, yes, in a probably different sense than the limited to the data warehouse narrative.
Interesting. Trying to process all of that, but I get your point. I mean, you just need to be in a position where you still have the option to decide. But on the other end, if a company does need the full suite, I mean, there are other companies, vendors who do this. Again, they're not in the room, who won't be named, that have also seen the light in that aspect, that started with just one composable element and have now spread out into full suites, with the understanding that you can still chop it up into what fits your organization best.
Look, I think from purely from product strategy perspective, I think that's a really, really hard call. We've learned this ourselves because you will, if you want to do email right, you will have to be as good as Klaviyo or something that's a market standard for that, MailChimp for that standard. And it's a big company that's been doing it for 15 years, right? So it's really unlikely that you have the resources to develop this, even if you can fundraise 150 or 200 million or $1 billion. I don't think you can do it unless you actually can become the next Salesforce. So there has to be a reasonable limits on being specialist in area from end to end, and you have to kind of be reasonable about where that end to end is. So I'm curious though, we talked about kind of maybe question to you if you don't mind turning the table.
Turning the tables.
And I'm curious on how do you see use cases, because we talk to when we talk about CDP, everyone in Europe at least goes immediately into email. In Middle East and in Asia, it's WhatsApp and whatnot. So it's kind of these direct customer engagements, right? But how do you see it in context of, for example, advertising? Because at least 40% of our use cases, and that's probably given to our background, is in advertising, both buy and sell side. And I don't hear that a lot, to be honest, in markets where we operate. How do you view that?
The biggest one you always hear is ad suppression. But to be honest, every company that I've interacted with, ad suppression is not activated, and it's not necessarily something that they've thought about recently. But in that sense, I did have an interesting discussion the other day that who's had proven use cases saying, hey, if you apply the ad suppression use case, you'll see an average drop in your ad spend savings of around 10%. So being able to work with ad and the use cases, that's one of the more quicker ones. Having said that, I've also seen some changes in where personalization gets involved with advertising, which is highly interesting, where you share the customer profile to custom make ads for that true one-to-one. So in that sense, if you're looking at savings, ad suppression is the default way to go now. It's the hottest ticket in the use case world. But yeah, what about you guys then?
Really interesting because I guess we have started from markets in Southeast Asia which were really customer acquisition heavy. This is less of a retention, simply given the growth and the dynamics of those economies, right? And one of the things that came up is just customers want better segmentation for advertising and unify that segmentation effectively orchestrated across all channels. But if you practically look at it, I hear the point that you mentioned about ad personalization, but the problem is that you can't do this in 70% of the ad market. So Google won't let you do it. Facebook or Meta won't let you do it. So you're effectively talking about niche programmatic where you can generate an image for a person. And I get that. That's sexy, but it's just not scalable to where the budgets really are. What we see, and one of the probably other more interesting use cases in advertising, we've effectively seen customers applying CDP as they would have DMP for audience management internally, especially when they somehow not just buy ads for themselves, but do somehow transact it. So we've got one of our publicly referenceable customers is Chemist Warehouse, largest pharmaceutical chain in Australia, and they started with us for the first couple of years only doing retail media. So we manage 600 really detailed segments and audiences, and they do sell campaigns on off-site in digital on the traditional advertising platforms, everything from obviously Meta, Google, Trade Desk, Pinterest, Snapchat, all of that. They do that with audiences that we create and curate, obviously managing quite a bit of the signals and very niche detailed audiences that their vendors love because they can't get them to the traditional media buying agencies, right? So there's a use cases that are like that. We do the similar thing in Saudi Arabia, actually in travel, for travel operator Meta Search that we work with. So there's I think a lot more activation of advertising, but it's a lot closer to DMP, traditional DMP use cases category that sort of went away and fizzled away. But I think the need for audience management for buy and sell side of advertising really still stands.
But aren't you referring more to retail media networks or clean rooms being able to share the anonymized data and only contextual data of that specific user with a third party?
I think you could think of it of a audience synchronization with DSPs directly. I would say that this is a fork of it, but again, clean rooms, data exchanges, personally, and that's purely personal opinion, I'm not so bullish on because I don't see the overlap, I don't see the adoption, I see a lot of buzz, but I have just not seen much real world utility. I think that's a use case that's going to be aspirational more than it's practically here. Let's make some money as a business.
I can't go too deep into it, but I recently saw a demo of some in India, how this has been applied, and I have to say it is fascinating. It's something called the Open Network Democratized Commerce, ONDC. I forgot what the DC stands for, but it's definitely an interesting topic to look into, where they have an open framework for marketplaces, where they allow buyers and sellers to communicate with each other directly. But there's some fascinating things going on in India that I hope to see expanding into other countries.
Interesting.
All right, so consent. You guys have that built in. I mean, if we look at the website, the Meiro store, I saw it pop up there, and we briefly touched upon it before. Consent is driven into all the events being transmitted to Meiro. But I mean, there's a lot of buzz, if we're talking about buzzwords, about preference management. How do people change their status? How do you guys take control of that consent throughout the entire distribution of data into downstream?
Certainly. So, in the sense of the consent, we are splitting the consent per identifier, because you saw the complicated identity graph, right? And you saw multiple devices connected there. So for each device identifier, we are keeping the consent, and we are calculating the latest version of the consent in the real time. So if you change in your cookie bot or anywhere else, if you change the consent, we will get the consent setting with the latest event from this device. and then we can actually calculate its status, and then we are able to actually filter the devices on multiple levels. So first, you can take a look at the conditions in the segments and filter it there. Or when we are implementing the destinations themselves that you can use both in Journey Canvas and here in the segments, then those are actually checked at the time you are exporting the devices to the destination. So for example, Google Ads, and if you have like the marketing consent, you can see that I have here a database of 7.3 thousand profiles. But for Google Ads, I only have possibility to activate 3.8 thousand devices. Some of those profiles here will not have any website history because those are profiles across from all the data sources. So there will be some only sent emails, some only coming from the CRM. So there is a certain portion who have never been to the website and didn't have a chance to actually give us the consent. But then also we can check the consent when exporting to the destination itself. And as Pavel mentioned, the AdTech use case is quite interesting. So if you take a look at the identity as we constructed that, you see different devices that are assigned to the same customer. So if you select the customer in the segment, you are not selecting the device itself, you are selecting the complete customer. So if, for example, you have audience where you want to target people who are interested in some product, and the customer actually visited this product page, for example, on one of the devices, we can actually target all of the devices belonging to the customer, right? With the consent, of course. So we check the consent, and if we have the consent, we are not targeting. So this is actually like one of the questions. If you are doing segments based on the behavior on the website, then I can do the same thing in Google Analytics, right? Just simple condition. If the product page is this, then just create the segment. But it's not the same because in Google Analytics with this condition, you are targeting only a device, a single device. You are not targeting also the other two devices, which can be more important to the customer. But with us, we are actually exporting all three devices for the customer.
Okay.
Even if he did the action on one of them.
Pretty cool. So that means that, so that user will be on the audience list multiple times, and Google can take direct action to that. That's pretty interesting. What about server-side conversions? We have the server-side technology. I mean, it's not the holy grail. There are still, consent rules to take into account for that matter.
How do we manage predictive data science AI models in CDP and outside of CDP, and how are we thinking about it?
Certainly. So in the sense of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, as I said earlier here, we are very open and we are very flexible in the sense of integration. We have a basic library of algorithms that can bring you to the 80% of the use case. So for example, the recommendation engine or some predictive, you can see here like the gender, the lifestyle, based on the behavior on the website. We can do lifetime value and some like the usual stuff you would expect from a platform like this. This is already baked in, and those can be customized. The thing is about the customization is that, again, the philosophy is to be very transparent, very open. So when you see here the profile page itself with some attributes, which we defined on the background a little bit, attributes are extracted knowledge from the events. As you are receiving the events themselves, they are forming the customer profile, and then you can actually create your own calculation on top of those events and extract the information, like a list of unique items or a list of something else. And you can also calculate things on the fly here. So when we are recommending some products, for example, it's a smart attribute that can take a look at the history of the customer, can look at other customers, calculate anything from the collaborative filtering to basically anything that you can code with the Python or SQL. and then we can actually use it for activation in destinations and everywhere else. Now, even though we have the library of algorithms provided, and it can take you, it has like a good performance, like the general one, they can be customized, and it's actually quite easy to do so, because what you are seeing here is the CDP, is the Business Explorer, as we call it, and this is the like end user application. This is what the marketer would use to actually create the segments and so on. But there is a second component that we are using, which we are calling Meiro integrations. And this is actually what's making the magic happen in the terms of the integration. So anytime you have like a MySQL version 2016 and you need to connect to it because it has some useful data from POS from way ago, or if you want to send data to some internal database or object storage, file storage, or if you want to run your own algorithm that will calculate and train the model and then use it in calculation, you can do it here. So we have, for example, this applied also to the destinations. And you can see here that this is this is the destination for the smart emailing, for the emailing platform. So every time I click export here, it actually executes this workflow, and it's nicely visualized, and you can actually modify it. So this is actually what's allowing us in those very complex environments in on-premises where, for example, in a bank, it's very common that you have Kafka as ESB. So if you want to send SMS, email, or so, you are not doing that using Infobip or any other provider. You are not doing that over the REST API. You are sending Kafka messages. And Kafka, it's ridiculous. It's so notorious that they have like a gazillion different ways on how to authenticate it, right? So you have Kerberos and you have LDAP and you have different things. There is no possibility a boxed product would be able to just plug in and play the Kafka integration in some bigger company. This is where we actually come in, because we are able to simply modify the loader here, swap it, in just like a few hours, connect using correct SSL certificates, connect to the schema registry for the event format, and then send it correctly in the same format as the ESB is expecting that. And this is not a product change. So we are not requesting custom development or so. This is just the configuration. We have different runtimes and so on. So even if the client, for example, has like this special requirements, okay, I want you to send the abandoned baskets, but just before you send it, hit my custom API and check the stock availability. And if it's below some artificial value, then do not send and replace it with some other product. And also check the semaphore of this specific thing we have in the product feed at the same time. So we actually brought this like I would almost call it a low code, because it's like defined visually, but at the same time you keep the flexibility, because with like I think 200 different components, you can actually run here SQL, you can run here Python, you can run here like a bash or something. So anything on the integration side where we collect the data from the sources, and the example with MySQL version 2016 was not something I made up. This is like actually in production right now. So we are able to connect to those. And as I said, we are coming from the data engineering boutique, and we are used to do those integrations for the clients. So anytime they throw at us something, we go and we make it happen. And we are not like this this vendor who says, okay, here is an API, just send us the data and you need to do the work. We do the work for the client.
There's one thing saying this is what you used to do, but it's another to be able to create a user interface on it. And this is available for all Meiro clients, I take it.
Yeah, this is integral part of the product.
This is a part of a stack. And I think, Matthew, maybe this shows you that we think about CDP users a little bit differently than some CDPs are thinking about marketers. Right?
Seriously, we're saving the best till last year.
Yeah, we're thinking about two distinct personas. We have both users in IT data, however they are organized, and we have end consumer, so the structured data in marketing. What I really, in terms of, again, product philosophy, I'm sure 1,000 people will challenge me on that, but I really strongly reject the whole notion of a citizen data scientist, like having a black box algorithm baked into something, toggle these three things, and think you're parameterizing an algorithm that's going to run the same for a company that sells grocery online and company that sells travel packages and cars, like it's just not going to work the same. So I think we prefer this customizable where, your team, your partner, external specialist can come in, build you that model and embed it here, or run it in an external solution. We have a good experience with customers running their own data science operations in Databricks that we don't see, but they treat Meiro treat a CDP as a feature store, as a really clean data source. And of course, we would be operationalizing the results of that, which again is a bit another struggle after you've run your model. Now, so what, right? So yeah, a little bit different approach, I guess.
Still very impressive, though. But I think you weren't finished, V. We're still looking for.
Yeah, it was just that the integration piece is done, basically. And Pavel wanted to touch on the real-timeness of the platform. So basically...
Let's dive into the real-time then.
Okay, so you saw me create the event with the greeting. We sent it. We plugged it into identity resolution. We created an attribute that is extracting the greeting out of it. And let's very, very quickly just create a new segment that will be picking up all the people who has a greeting. So let's take the greeting, and I will just take all the customers where the greeting is known. So currently I have 13 people here, and let's switch to the channels and pop-up banners. So this is basically those annoying things on the website where you
built a feature out of it. I'm just saying. No, just kidding.
And let's create I know you. And this is actually my favorite part, because usually the pop-ups, they are like omnipresent. They are always everywhere, and they are not very personalized. And with our solution, let's switch back here. You can actually create many different banners. You can set them by priority, and you can use server-side segment execution to tell if the device is belonging to the customer who is a member of the segment, right? So you saw me create the segment where I will show it all to all the people who had the greeting set up. So I can put here a segment condition, and there is, I did it as I did it as untitled, I think. I need to be able to find it. My segments. Sorry, never mind. Let's create it again and put there a correct number. Correct name. And let's use the greeting attribute, and it's known. And then go to the pop-up banners. Create pop-up banners. I know you. And here set up the condition, which is called segment. I can of course use any other condition I know in the browser itself that's given.
But you want to demonstrate the server-side value that's
exactly. So
present.
I brought this segment, the greeting, with the cookie I want to use as the identifier, because we are also possibility to identify the browser based on the email or phone number. Maybe do some frequency capping here. So if you want to rotate it based on the frequency and so on. If you want to show something only once, I can ignore the frequency cap, set it to the max priority, and maybe do HTML. There's possibility to do template, gallery, images, whatever you like. And I know you should be here. Position should be middle. Banner 300 pixels. Looks good, I guess. Is in segment and activate it. And what I did here is basically create the segment itself. And now when I'm here in the browser itself, it should
It's transparent, but it's there. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Didn't set the background. And the thing is that when I take the Meiro store, because you see that I visited with the event greeting Pavel, if I take it to a different browser and
it's not showing. Yeah,
it's not showing. So it's actually doing the request to the backend, and it's evaluating the segment in the real time to see if the customer
Very
profile,
nice.
which is containing the cookie, is currently in the segment or not. So it's not pre-calculated, it's actually on the fly, and it takes approximately 20 to 40 milliseconds. So it can be used on the scale.
And again, what's important here to think about the composability, right? Because we are not saying we have to do the content, because your CMS can do this. You don't need a CDP to do this, but your CMS doesn't know the traffic, right? And so use at least the API that we have in the background checking the segment participation. Use the same API, call it, and tell your banner to check CDP if the customer belongs in that segment or not, if what to show them. So you are not giving the 10% discount to welcome users to someone who's been shopping with you for 10 years, but just now decided to show up from a new device because, they updated their phone. So
yeah. And with all the cross-device identities in there, you're not also risking potentially showing it on another device to a known user. Very interesting. This is
well, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Tim Cook says one last thing. The backend API is actually quite interesting because it doesn't always need to only tell you about if the customer is belonging to the segment, but you saw all the different attributes.
All the attributes, yeah, and I'm seeing them there in the payload.
And we can actually mark some of the attributes which you are comfortable with being like returned to the browser.
Yeah.
So for example, here the country most frequently, I'm using VPN, so it's Germany, of course. You can actually
predicted
return
values,
it.
yeah.
So predicted values, the countries, and so on, some engagement score, or recommended products, for example. And there's actually a bunch of our clients who are not using the banners themselves, but they are directly integrating the REST API to actually do things like recommended products or information about the customer, greetings, and so on. So it's really nice use case for us.
You ever have those moments where you go into a demo and you think, I know what it's going to be about? You guys really went above and beyond, because there's so much more to Meiro than I thought. And I definitely hope coming across it a little bit more often in my work, especially with your growing client base, using this solution, because I think it's so versatile. As Pavel, as you pointed out, composable is good, but there's a different way to approach it, and I think you guys are hitting the nail on the head. I'm using that one again, but it just offers a very flexible solution for companies in various stages of maturity. But not only that, you're also making it available in various technical offerings as well, which I think is going to be great, especially for some of these tougher markets, from Switzerland to the Middle East to the Far East, and these various niches where you guys are working in. Very impressive.
Matthew, thank you for the opportunity to come and showcase it. Like you said, we do have a good product. I think this just reflects on how behind we are with marketing and with our brand building. So we need to do that a little bit more.
I know a good product marketing manager if you ever need one. So, but I hope this video will help to get your word out there a little bit more, because if they see what I'm seeing, I'm very convinced that the interest will grow in Meiro. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.